The truck's engine coughed like a dying animal before finally sputtering to silence at the edge of the muddy farm lane. Ryan wiped the sweat from his brow with a grimy forearm, scanning the rusted hood, the bent fender, and the worn tires as if each flaw were mocking him. He hadn't seen a paycheck in 2 weeks. His fridge was an empty cavern save for a lonely can of beans, and the flickering light bulb in his kitchen barely illuminated the eviction notice curling on his apartment door. He hated being this broke. Hated it with a kind of desperation that clawed at his chest every morning. Yet when he looked at his son, Liam, huddled on the passenger seat with shoes so worn through the soles were practically flapping, he knew he had to try. The driver's side door opened and a woman stepped out, brushing her dark hair from her face, the wet strands clinging to her cheeks. Her jeans fit like armor, boots polished, top a deep red that made her stand out against the gray drizzle. "Hi," she said, voice calm but carrying an undertone of impatience. My truck just died. Can you help?" Her eyes scanned the truck, darted back to Ryan, then down to the mud-stained sneakers. There was a hesitation there, a calculation that made Ryan tighten his jaw. "I'll take a look," he said, forcing a smile he didn't feel. Hands trembling from cold and fatigue, he popped the hood. The engine was a mess of leaks, corrosion, and tape holding more than a few hoses together. He worked quickly, muttering to himself, cursing the bolts that refused to budge. Rain soaked through his jacket, and Liam shivered beside him, blanket thin and threadbare wrapped around his shoulders. "Sorry, buddy," Ryan said, patting him on the head. "Dad's doing his best." She lingered, heels sinking slightly into the wet grass, glancing around the farm. There were fences that leaned like they were about to collapse, a barn with missing panels, a few chickens pecking at mud. Yet despite the rundown farm and the rain streaking her jacket, she carried herself like she owned the world. Ryan noticed how her gaze softened when it fell on Liam, how her hands unconsciously tightened the strap of her designer bag. "Do you need tools, help?" she asked cautiously. "I've got what I need," Ryan replied, wincing as a wrench slipped from his numb fingers. "Just might take a while." She nodded, and for a moment he caught her fidgeting, brushing wet hair back, biting her lip. Something about her wasn't what it seemed. She didn't act like a farmer, didn't speak like one either. But she didn't offer the easy assistance of cash, which was odd. She just waited, silently watching as he twisted, lifted, pried, and prayed the engine would cooperate. 2 hours later, his hands raw, muscles screaming, Ryan leaned back against the truck, oil-smeared and exhausted. "I think we're good," he said. The engine roared to life with a healthy growl. Liam whooped from the seat, jumping with excitement despite the damp. She smiled, hesitant, almost shy. "Wow, you really did it." She extended a hand. "I don't know how to thank you." Ryan shook it, shrugging. "Just glad I could help. Trucks don't fix themselves, I guess." His stomach growled, reminding him of the beans in his fridge. He laughed nervously, brushing mud from his jacket. "Do you want a coffee?" "I know a cafe not far from here," she offered, voice softening, eyes flicking at Liam. Ryan hesitated. Free coffee was a luxury he hadn't tasted in weeks. "Sure, that'd be great," he said, trying not to sound desperate. The cafe was warm and smelled like cinnamon and roasted beans, a stark contrast to the damp farm and muddy boots. She ordered lattes and a chocolate croissant, her card swiping with ease, polished nails tapping. Ryan counted coins in his pocket, realizing he had just enough for a tip, and felt the sting of contrast. His hands were shaking, not from cold this time, but from exhaustion and the sheer improbability of this moment. "So, do you live around here?" she asked, sipping her latte, watching him closely. "Somewhere in town." "Small apartment," he said, staring into his coffee. "Rent's going up soon. Might have to move again." He didn't mention the eviction notice curling like a threat back at his apartment. Didn't mention the endless nights counting coins just to feed Liam. "I see," she said softly, eyes distant for a moment. Then, with a faint knowing smile, she asked, "Would you consider helping with my father's fleet trucks? I have a few that are acting up. Could be steady work?" Ryan's heart thudded. Steady work? Regular pay? Something real? But he also saw the subtle tension in her expression, the way her fingers tightened around the cup, a nervous flicker he didn't expect from someone who looked so poised. Yeah, that sounds..." He paused, swallowed hard. Like it could change things. The conversation lingered, charged with unspoken things. Rain slid down the cafe windows, blurring the outside world. Ryan realized how close he was to hope, how fragile it felt. He glanced at Liam, who was staring wide-eyed at a plate of crumbs, and Ryan's throat tightened. He'd been so beaten down that the possibility of steady work felt like a dream. Yet here it was, offered by someone he barely knew, someone whose life seemed untouchably different from his own. Later, walking back through the muddy lane, the truck humming behind them, she stopped. "I should tell you something," she said, looking directly at him, eyes serious, unblinking. "I'm not exactly who I seem to be." Ryan blinked, wet hair plastered to his forehead. "What do you mean? I'm my father's daughter. We're wealthy, really wealthy. I didn't want you thinking this was some kind of charity case. I just needed help." Her hands fidgeted, tugging at the edges of her jacket, and Ryan could see the vulnerability behind the carefully maintained elegance. He stared, unsure how to respond, feeling the weight of exhaustion, disbelief, and a strange flutter of something like hope all at once. He realized that even now he had no idea how this would end. No idea if her revelation meant relief, danger, or heartbreak. And yet, as Liam climbed out of the truck and hugged his leg, wet and muddy but laughing, Ryan felt a shift, something fragile and terrifying, something that might just change everything. Ryan's hands were still trembling as he watched her step back, the rain dripping from her hair and the edge of her jacket. Wealthy, a millionaire's daughter. His mind refused to compute it. Every instinct screamed caution, yet there was a raw honesty in her eyes he couldn't ignore. Liam tugged at his sleeve, muddy sneakers sliding in the puddles. "Dad, she's nice," he said softly, his voice hopeful, innocent. "I know, buddy," Ryan murmured, rubbing his temple. "I know." They drove back to town in silence, the truck's engine purring smoothly now. The streetlights glinted off the wet asphalt, and Ryan found himself stealing glances at her. She looked ordinary, really, in that confident, effortless way that made it almost impossible to gauge her real world. The jeans, the red jacket, she could have been anyone, yet every move, every posture whispered privilege. He thought about the bills stacked in his apartment, the empty fridge, Liam's threadbare coat. And yet here she was, offering an unexpected lifeline, a chance that could lift them from constant struggle. "Look," she began, voice gentle but deliberate. "I don't want you thinking I pitied you. Or Liam, I've seen enough to know life isn't easy. I just needed help with the trucks, and you didn't hesitate." She smiled faintly, a spark of vulnerability and gratitude that made Ryan's chest tighten. "That says something about you." Ryan exhaled, eyes flicking toward Liam, who was pressed against the seat, staring out the window, oblivious to the adult tensions swirling around him. "I don't usually get chances like this," he admitted, voice rough. "I mean, it's been a rough few months. No work, no money. Sometimes I feel like I'm failing him every single day." "You're not failing," she said firmly. Her gaze softened, the storm in the sky reflected in her brown eyes. "Liam, he's lucky. You keep showing up for him. That counts for a lot. Believe me, I've seen what counts in this world, and that's everything." The truck pulled up outside Ryan's apartment building, the wet bricks gleaming under the street lamp. The small, worn facade looked even more fragile in contrast to her poised elegance. He imagined her stepping inside, calling a driver or a chauffeur, living in a world he couldn't touch. And yet, here she was, reaching into his life with something real, something tangible. Thanks," Ryan said, voice catching slightly. "I mean for this. For the coffee, the offer, for not judging us." She tilted her head, brushing a wet strand of hair behind her ear, and gave him a small, encouraging smile. "I don't judge. Life's messy. I get that more than you know." They lingered for a moment, awkward yet charged, and Ryan's thoughts darted back to the empty fridge, the flickering bulb, the duct-taped backpack Liam carried to school. He thought about the nights he counted coins at the self-checkout, the endless forms he filled, the rejection letters, the constant grind. And now, just like that, a door had opened. When she finally stepped away, Ryan watched her retreating figure, boots splashing lightly in puddles, coat flaring around her hips, and realized he had no plan beyond the next day. But for the first time in weeks, maybe months, he felt a fragile ember of hope. Maybe this, whatever it was, could be real. That night, in the small apartment, Ryan cooked a meager dinner of beans and bread, while Liam devoured the scraps, eyes bright with laughter and crumbs. The flickering bulb barely illuminated the cramped space, and yet there was warmth, a quiet hope that had been absent for too long. He thought about her words, about seeing what counts, about showing up. And despite exhaustion that pressed against every muscle, he found himself smiling, a little. The next morning brought the phone call. Her voice, crisp yet warm, floated through the line. "The trucks are ready for you. Tomorrow, first light. I'll meet you at the yard." She paused. "And Ryan? Don't feel pressured. You've already done more than most would have." "Got it," he replied, swallowing hard. His stomach twisted with nerves, hope, and disbelief. He hung up, staring at Liam, who was brushing teeth with a threadbare towel, the sink dripping beside him. The boy looked up, smiling nervously. "Dad, are we really okay?" Ryan knelt, grasping Liam's small shoulders, voice soft but steady. "Yeah, kiddo. We're going to be okay. Really okay, just stick with me a little longer, all right?" Liam nodded, eyes wide. And Ryan felt the weight of responsibility settle differently today, lighter somehow, with possibility in its place. The yard the next day was enormous, filled with gleaming trucks that looked like they belonged in a commercial. Ryan's stomach twisted at the stark contrast to the farm, to his apartment, to the shoes that had worn through months ago. She was there waiting, leather jacket now replaced with a tailored coat, boots clicking with authority. Her hair caught the sunlight, face radiant, eyes assessing. "Ready?" she asked, voice steady but inviting. Ryan nodded, stepping forward, hands clenched around the tools that had once been a lifeline. "Let's get to work." And as the first truck rumbled beneath his hands, the weight of struggle behind him, the spark of hope ahead, he realized that kindness, honesty, and resilience had opened a door he never imagined possible. That one act, repairing her truck on a muddy lane, had rerouted more than just a vehicle. It had rerouted his life. Because sometimes, he thought, the world gives you a chance, and all it asks is that you keep showing up. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to change everything. The rain had stopped. The sun glinted off chrome and oil. And for the first time in a long time, Ryan believed in the possibility of real, lasting change. The moral lingered quietly, between the hum of engines and the soft laughter of a boy who would finally sleep without fear tonight. One act of generosity, one moment of noticing, can reroute a life forever.